Hey DIYers, welcome back to this fourth episode in this series of building a new home. And if you've seen the other three, I hope you've enjoyed them and they've kind of opened your eyes to what goes on in building a new house. And if you haven't seen them, don't worry, I'll have a link down below to each one of the previous series. And at the end of the video, I'll have a playlist link that you can go to and watch them there if you like. Now in this fourth episode, we're going to look at the plumbing, the electrical, the HVAC, and just kind of go from there. First episodes where we talked about all the pre-planning all the way up to your foundation. Episode 2 was framing. It dealt with framing that started at the bottom plate of the foundation, working to the windows and doors. And episode 3 took off from there and talked about your second story, stairs, roof, shingles, and that sort of stuff. So let's get started in this episode. We're going to start out with plumbing. And with plumbing, you got two choices these days. One is PEX, which is what this is here, or copper. Now, most people are kind of going towards PEX, and in my area, it's almost exclusively PEX. And what does PEX stand for? It stands for polyethylene cross-linked. And so there's three types, and the difference in the types has to do with when it's cross-linked and how it's cross-linked. So there's PEX A, which is probably what this is here, and PEX A is cross-linked as it's made, I can tell you that. PEX A tends to be what they're putting in homes because it's more flexible. It will expand some. There's PEX B and there's PEX C. PEX B and C are more expensive than PEX A, so that's why A is being used. PEX B and C are more stiff and don't bend as well. PEX A can be fixed if there's a kink by just heating it up, whereas PEX B and C can't. But basically, you're probably gonna have PEX A in your house. And I really like PEX because it has the ability to stretch a little bit in case your pipes start to freeze, whereas copper, when it freezes, it busts. But I still think there's a place for copper in your house, and we'll talk about that. Obviously, the blue is cold and your red is hot. And how this PEX comes in and how it's distributed can be done one of two ways. And so let's go show you how they're doing it in this house. Now in these houses here, it's a single water line coming in through the foundation, which we've talked about. I like that. All your water is distributed from this one single line. And this here is the shutoff valve. Shut the water off to the whole house in case you have a leak. Now your main water line is going to come over here, and this is where the hot water is going to be. And this is where it's going to get split off into your hot and cold. From there, it's going to run up into the ceiling. And the nice thing is they did put pipe insulation on this pipe on the outside walls to help keep it insulated so it doesn't freeze, and two, to keep it cooler in the summer. Because I can tell you, in the summer, when this pipe's running through the attic and they aren't insulated, that hot water is almost boiling when it comes out. It takes a while for that hot water to cool down with the cold. Let me tell you, when I'm taking a shower, it's a lot of cold and a little hot because it's so hot coming out of that attic. And you can see here, you got your two main trunks for your hot and cold water coming in. And from there, it splits off to give you your hot and cold water for, like in this case, to the shower or over to a sink. And you can see it comes in at what looks like about maybe 3/4 and splits off into 1/2 inch. And you can see your hot and cold water trunks coming down for your hot and cold water to your sink. What I would like to see, I hate this, and what I mean by that, they put these benders in here, which is nice because that way it keeps it from kinking and it makes it take a nice swooped 90 versus coming down and making it, you'll kink it and bend it. What I would rather see instead of this, PEX comes down and connects into a copper fitting because this stuff is really hard to mess with under the sink. Whereas if it's got a copper stub out, then you got the flexible piping that you can put, and it's much easier to work under your sink. Trust me, when I've had to do it, this stuff is stiff and kind of sucks. And the same thing would go for the toilet. When it comes out of the toilet, it usually just comes out and goes straight to it. Whereas I'd like to see a copper fitting hit here, and then you got your flexible tubing that goes to your toilet. If there's a problem, you can work with this copper stub out. Whereas if there's a problem here, you really can't. You're kind of stuck with whatever they give you. Now they got extra long here, but for like the toilet, they may only give you a few inches, so you haven't got a lot to work with there. Now the big advantages to PEX is one, no soldered joints. This is one continuous line that runs up and through and hooks into your main water line. So there's very few joints to fail, and two, there's no soldering, there's no burning into your wood to get it soldered or any of that, and it goes in a lot faster. They can put this in way faster than they can plumb up the copper. Now when it comes to your drain lines and that, it's all pretty typical PVC, and as far as what size PVC, depends on what it's for, whether it's a toilet, sink drain, whether it's a vent pipe and that sort of stuff, and that's all done to code. And you can see with PVC, you got all these joints. Well, you'd have the same thing. Think of this as copper and you'd have all the same thing. Whereas this, you can see you got a continuous line that swoops around. You can actually bend it. See how this is bending here without kinking? It goes through and goes down. So that's a big advantage. This day and age, it probably is a little cheaper than copper because copper is kind of expensive. And I'll have a link down below to an article if you want to go read and learn more about PEX and all the different things and how it's put together and that, in case you're interested in knowing all that stuff. Now this is a bathroom behind me, as you can see, and this is your cold water line that goes down for your toilet, and this is a vent pipe for your plumbing that goes out through the roof. One of the few things I do like about my house is the way this PEX is set up. Now I showed you how they got the PEX coming in as one main water line, goes to the hot water heater, branches off in your hot and cold and distributes it everywhere. I like at my house is what they have is called a manifold. And what that is it's a manifold for your hot and cold water, and it's got a bunch of attachments. And so each individual room, bathroom, your master bathroom, your kitchen, your laundry room, all come into this manifold first. So your main water supply trunk is going to come in and feed this manifold first. And from there, your hot and cold water is going to go out each direction from it. The nice thing about this is you can turn off one area of your house, just the cold or just the hot, and work on it, versus in this house you got to turn the whole house off to do any kind of plumbing work. And within that manifold it has a main water shutoff also, so I could shut the water off just like they do over here and shut the water off to the whole house. And if I need something better, well, I can go out to the water main and shut it off out at the street. Now let's talk a minute about your exterior hose faucet or hose bib. Now, as you can see here, it's insulated like I talked about. It's on the wall, it comes down and then it goes out the wall. We've got this nice boot on here, and they've kind of did a half-ass attempt at sealing it up with the spray foam, but whatever, another day. This is going to be way different for the north versus the south. Now down here where I'm at, although these last 2 winters we've had a little bit of an issue, and these guys are going to have problems with that, whereas I didn't, and I'll tell you why. But we don't necessarily have frost-free type hose faucets. And you may have seen them where they stick into the wall 6, 8 inches, 10 inches. And basically what it is the faucet itself turns off inside the wall where it's insulated, so that in the winter, when it gets really, really cold and things are freezing, your hose won't freeze because the shutoff's back here. From here to the outside of your house, there's no water. So there's nothing there to freeze. Where we don't have that. This is all we have, and that's pretty standard down here. Here's where they're going to come into problem. The last 2 winters down here in Texas where I'm at, we've had it cold enough that it froze for a couple of days. And these pipes, if they freeze long enough, they will bust. And this one's going to bust in this wall and make a huge mess. And they can't do anything about it but hope. Whereas in my house, I have an actual shutoff at the manifold for the front and back hose bib. So in the winter when it's cold, I can shut that water off, open the valve, let the water drain out, and I don't care if it freezes, because it's not going to freeze the water in the pipe because there's none in it. This is going to be interesting this winter how they do if we have a horrible freeze like we had last year. And so with that, if you are in the northern climates, I would definitely check into what kind of insulative hose bib they're putting in your house. Is it going to have a shutoff within the wall, or is it going to be just like a standard one like this and you hope it don't freeze? Or if it's PEX, they've got a shutoff in a manifold so don't worry about it. Ask about that. Personally, if I was living in the north and worried about freezing, I'd want a hose bib that shuts off within the wall cavity that's insulated versus this. So next, let's talk about your electrical. Now, electrical basically is going to be code, and you're going to do what it's required by code and all that, and that's not really what I'm going to get into. But one thing I'm going to talk about is that in this house, what I really like and I wish I had in my house, the electric box is in the garage inside, and so is the grounding rod that's in here. So that means this is 2 less penetrations into the house by having this. Now, you're still going to have a penetration through the outside because your electrical meter has to be out there. So there's still a worry as to how they're going to seal that up and make it air and water tight. But with this, at least it's on the inside. So one, if it's raining or snowing or cold as all get out, you can go in your garage, flip the breaker, versus me, I have to go outside in the cold or the rain, investigate it and get all wet and everything else. So it is nice having it in here. But what I really want to talk about when it comes to electrical is outlets. One thing I would ask for, and that is an electrical plug or box up high. So when you put your big screen TV, whether it's going to be on this wall or over here on this wall, you've got to plug in up high. You just plug it in here. You don't have all this cord dangling down behind here to plug it in. And the same thing I would also ask for is a cable junction right here for your cable TV or whatever you're going to do. Again, to save cords coming all down the wall and everything else, and ease of hookup. As far as code, if somebody knows for sure what this really is, but I think you got to have an outlet on at least every wall, unless it's shorter than I think 4 foot. But you got to have an outlet every 8 feet on the wall. So if the wall's 17 foot long, you've got to have 2 outlets on it. That's minimum. You can always have more. And so like in your living room area, you may want to have a couple extra, for extra lighting, hookups, and things like that. And where I would definitely ask for a whole bunch of outlets is in your garage. Now this garage here has 1, 2, 3, 4, which actually 5, which ain't bad. So one of them's gonna have to be for the probably 220 for the hot water heater to hook into. I had 2, I think, in my house. But what I'm talking about is having extra plug-ins, say up cabinet height. So if you're going to turn your garage into a shop or part of it into a shop, you have workbenches out there and stuff like that, you've got all kinds of plug-ins for your tools and battery chargers and everything else and lights that you need versus having to run cords all the way around. And the other thing I'd ask to be safe, because you never know, is to have at least one 220 outlet in there. Just in case, again, if you're gonna have a shop with some big power tools, they're gonna run on 220. So it'd be nice to have at least one 220, maybe 2 220s, but at least one in there, because you could always unplug and plug in. But one 220 in there would be very nice. And the other thing I would do is that your electrical boxes in your garage, I'd make them a higher amp, like a 30 amp versus a 20, so that you don't trip the breakers when you're plugging in multiple tools in one outlet. And again, as far as like in your bedroom, have maybe some extra ones in here. They don't tend to put it in the closet, but maybe you want one in the closet. Like I say, this wall here, it's got 1. This wall here has 2, because it's over 8 foot. And one other thing I'd make sure is that I had a cable hookup in every bedroom. My house doesn't. Maybe you're gonna mount a TV on the wall. So have bracing, as we talked about, in your bedroom for that TV to mount on. 2, have an electrical box up high for it to plug into, and your cable hookup to be up high also. Only downside of that is that, like in this house, say they were doing that, they don't know where you're gonna put a TV. So say they did it over here, but this is where you want your bed to be, it's not gonna work. But if you're doing a semi-custom home, you do have a little say on that, and so you can figure out, okay, I'm gonna put my bed here and TV will be here, I want the plugs here. And if you're not really sure, put them in anyway. Have them there, so in the future, they're there. It's a nice selling point. And if you happen to notice throughout this video, these little metal plates every once in a while, these are protection plates, and like in this case for electrical. So if you go to nail or screw something into the wall, you'll hit this. There's either a water line or electrical line behind there, and you gotta go above and below till you don't hit it. So these are kind of code where the electrical line was installed too close to the surface. They'll put these little plates on it. All right, next let's talk about the HVAC system. Now here where we're at in Texas, they tend to put them up in the attic. And right here I'm standing underneath the cold air return, and that's where you change your filter in that. Now I've lived where they've had them in the attic. I've lived where they've had them actually on the main floor in a closet, if you will. And when I was a kid, had a basement in the Midwest growing up, had it in the basement. I've also seen where they've had them on the roof of a house. Attic's okay, but I don't like it in these attics. And the reason is these aren't what we call conditioned spaces. And we'll talk more about what that means when we talk about insulation. Now, the other builder that I toured that does the spray foam, I've seen a couple of those houses, they actually had them in, say, a closet, which is kind of nice because then it's on a conditioned space. But the ducting all went through the attic. So what determines what size HVAC system you need? Well, there's several things, but a couple of them is going to be the size of your house. That's going to be the big one. And 2, how airtight it is. If you've got a really airtight house that's sealed up, you'll probably get away with a little smaller unit. And it's because they're just airtight and they don't need to make up for the leakiness of the house. Now, I'm not exactly sure, but I thought it was a half a ton, maybe it's a 1 ton per 1,000 square feet. But like in my house, it's 1,600 square foot and it had a 3 ton in it. So I really don't know what code is. Now next, let's talk about the ductwork itself. These are all what they call insulated flexible duct. And that's pretty much what everybody's going to because it's quick, it's easy, it's all in one fell swoop. Whereas you can get what they call hard pipe. And actually I would prefer hard pipe. But hard pipe is basically galvanized tubing that they use to put your ducts in with. Upside to that is it's got no drag for airflow. Whereas these, because it's corrugated basically, I mean, these come all shrunk up and then they just open them up and stretch them. While they're stretched, the inside still has a little bit of corrugation. And so you're gonna have some air drag on that. They come insulated, and that's definitely what you're gonna want, especially here where it's not a conditioned space. You're gonna want your ductwork insulated from that hot attic. If you don't believe me, try this little test. In the middle of the summer when it's 100 degrees midday and your air conditioner kicks on, go by one of the vents and put your hand over the vent and feel that air. As it comes through, it's first going to come through as warm or even hot before it gets cold. And that's with an insulated duct. So imagine if it wasn't insulated. You'd lose a lot of energy trying to cool the duct to get your house cold. The downsides to the hard piping is you got multiple joints. Whereas with this flex ducting, you got 2 joints. One where it connects to, say, and this one here is the cold air return, or it connects at the HVAC system itself, and where it runs to and dumps out at your register in your bedroom, bathroom, or whatever. So the only 2 places they need to seal are where it's at here and at the ductwork in the bathroom or bedroom or where it is. Whereas the hard pipe, it's only so long each section, and so each section has to be sealed. And then you have to come back around and insulate it. So there's a little more work, it's a little more expensive, but I like it better. And whoever you get to install your hard pipe has to be really good at getting your joints sealed up. Now I will tell you, I believe there's a material that they can mist and blow into those hard pipe ducts, seal up any holes they may have missed, and then they're airtight. And then naturally you put the insulation around them. One thing I would definitely require is that a leak test is done on your HVAC system before they close it all up. Now with the hard piping, they should do that because they got to check for leaks, but I would make sure that even this is leak tested. Now I don't know what the industry standard is as far as how much leakage they can have, but I would definitely want to know, and I'd want mine to be below that. And the other thing about these HVAC systems, you can get additional add-ons, like you can get a dehumidifier. I'm really surprised these houses have it. This here is a fresh air intake. And so they're assuming that these houses are going to be somewhat airtight. Well, I can tell you it's not, because I can see daylight through whatever they got on this. So when you got a really airtight house, you've got to have some sort of fresh air inlet that basically goes to your air conditioning unit. It has an exchange. It's cooled or heated, whichever it may be, and then it's blown out into your house. So I'm really surprised they have one of these, but on your really tightly insulated houses, you'll have to have a fresh air inlet for them. But when it comes to your HVAC system, I'd highly recommend that you consult some sort of HVAC engineer, consultant, rep for your specific house, especially if you're doing a semi-custom home. Kind of get it fit for your house. And you can talk about getting all kinds of different add-ons like dehumidifiers and all that. Now, I don't know a whole lot about air conditioning because there's a lot to know, but I'll leave a link down below to Matt Reisinger's YouTube channel. And he does a lot of videos on different aspects of HVAC systems, mini splits, cold air returns, dehumidifiers, the sizes, airtight, everything. So if you want to know a whole lot more, go look at his channel and you'll find everything you need to know there. And one last thing as we talk about the HVAC system is the penetration through the exterior of your house. Now I kind of like this one because it's coming out at somewhat of a 90, whereas mine's coming out of the house almost down like this, and it kind of sucks. But how they seal this up, all they've done here is spray in a bunch of canned spray foam to seal it up. The other thing I would ask them to do, and it's kind of a luxury, and I did it on my house as a retrofit, is there's a company called Airix that makes these boots that go around these. They make 2 different kinds, one for like stucco or brick, and another one for like lap siding, as to how it fits against the house. It's very nice because it fits tight against the house. It gives you an airtight seal, helps with the bugs. The UV rays on this pipe insulation here will eat that up in a couple of years. It'll be gone, have to be replaced. Whereas with that boot that has that wrapping around it, seals it up, it's waterproof, UV rays doesn't touch it. It's a nice little add-on, and actually it looks really nice on your house. And if you want to see more about that by any chance, I've got a video about it and I'll link it down below. You can go watch where I put one in on my house. So next, let's talk about insulation. As you can see behind me here, they're using what they call batt insulation, and this here is non-faced. You can get faced and non-faced. What that means is basically, does it have brown paper on it or does it not? What kind of insulations are there? Well, there's this batt stuff, this fiberglass batt. There's another type of batt type insulation called rock wool. Actually, probably a little better than this. You got your blow-in insulation, which you may see some of them will actually cover this over in plastic with a little hole in it, and they'll blow in your fiberglass insulation. I've even seen where they do with kind of like a paper material. And the other thing would be spray foam. Personally, I think spray foam is the way to go. Now let's talk about R value. And a lot of that's going to be dependent on probably your zone that you live in. So in your northern climates, you may have to have an R19 on your outside walls. Whereas here, I think R13 is all that's needed. And these batts are doing just that. It says right there, R13. And these are 2x4 walls. Now, why don't I like batt insulation versus the spray foam. With batt insulation, I don't care how good you are and how diligent you are about putting it in, you can't seal every hole up. Now these particular contractors are putting a mesh on here, stapling a mesh on, and they'll put the insulation in, they put a mesh on the other side to hold it in so it doesn't fall out. At least on this wall that connects with the garage. I'm guessing because air blow in here and blow out all their insulation before they get the sheetrock up. But as far as the walls themselves, no, they don't. Put it in, you don't put it in real tight, but I don't care what you do, you can't seal every hole up with batt insulation, whether it's rock wool, fiberglass, what have you. The blow-in probably does a little better job, but still, the spray foam is going to be your absolute best insulation. Personally, I think there's nothing better than spray foam. It beats the batt insulation hands down. So I'm in a different subdivision with a totally different builder, and as you can see, they spray foam the walls here. And this is the subdivision, like I say, for the price point, isn't much different than that other one I've been showing you. So it can be done. Now this is open cell spray foam. Now how do I know this is open cell spray foam? Well, one, how it's filled this cavity, and two, they had to shave it, and three, by the looks of this surface right here. So what's the difference between open cell and closed cell spray foam? Well, open cell spray foam is a lighter spray foam per area than your closed cell. It expands much more than your closed cell. It provides air barrier, but it doesn't provide as good water barrier. And it's a little messier to put in because like with this, they spray it on and it expands like you see here outside the studs, and they have to come back with some sort of shaving device, whether it's a big electric knife or whatever, and shave the overspray off. So because of that, you got a little more mess. The R value in your open cell is a little less per inch than your closed cell also. Now your closed cell, when it expands, is going to expand much less. It's not only an air barrier, but it's also a water barrier. Two, because it doesn't expand as much, you don't have to go through and do all this shaving. And three, because the R value is higher per inch, you don't necessarily need to fill the whole cavity. You can get an easy R13 or more with just 2 inches of closed cell spray foam. Just because they use spray foam don't mean they can't screw it up. As you see here, this cavity is full here, but not full there. Definitely not full here. So you need to know, why did they not fill this? This needs to be completely filled, because if it's not, you don't get your full R value. Again, they miss these areas, they need to come back and fill them in and respray it. Make sure you ask, hey, if they miss, they're going to come back and fix it or not. And another thing they did that you can see is they put that spray foam in all of the roof bays, all between the joists. That is excellent. That means the attic is going to be a conditioned space, meaning you could actually cool the attic. And so if you store stuff in there, it's not at 150 degrees. You can keep your attic, say, at 80, 82, while the rest of your house, for some of you wants to be 62, but whatever. And because of that conditioned space, when I showed you on that other house over there, where they had the narrow overhang and they had no vents, that's why, because all this is spray foam and sealed. So now this whole house is encapsulated and should be air and water tight. Now, as far as what spray foam should you get in your walls versus your ceiling or your roof, open cell, closed cell, that's going to be up to each individual. For me, I would like to see closed cell on the walls, 2 inches of closed cell, and go with a 2x4 wall. It's closed cell. Now I've got water and air barrier protection there. On my roofs, I'd like to see a couple inches of closed cell for the water part of it, and then the rest of it done in open cell. If that's not possible or cost prohibitive, I'd at least like to see closed cell on the walls and open on the roof. Or last resort would be like what they've done here, an open cell everywhere. Now, this particular builder goes around and spray foams behind all the exterior outlets. So all those are against that wall where the garage is on the other side. They've gone through and sprayed the back side of these to try and seal them up. I mean, that's good that they did that. But again, you're relying on somebody who has a care about their job, who wants to do a quality job. And I'll show you one over here where they spray foam the back side of it, but there's daylight coming through it. So if there's daylight, it's an opening. Now, granted, they've probably knocked out 90% of it, but if you're going to spend the money, let's go just that extra little bit and get that 10%. The other thing this builder's doing, and probably a lot of them, or I should say it ought to be standard, is they come back behind and they spray foam around the windows to seal them up, air seal them up. And this ought to be just a mandatory code if it's not in the code book to do, because that way you get a good tight air seal around your windows. Now, this particular builder didn't use the sill sealer under their bottom plates, they're relying on somebody to come back behind and put this spray foam along here to air seal it up. That's okay, but there again, you got to rely on somebody who gives a crap about their job and come around and do a good job at it. Now this doesn't look too bad, but I'm going to tell you, if I can find one, I've seen them where they're going along and then it'll be out here and they won't even be on the dang there. So again, a huge air leak. If you just sealed it when you put the plate down, or the other thing you could do instead of using a spray foam is you can get a liquid applied stuff and put along there. Now I have seen if you get spray foam in your walls, they have a service where they also seal down here, they seal along your double studs and stuff like that on your exterior walls, and that's something you could have added on. And this is why batt insulation fails. See, they got this gap between their framing, whereas if that was spray foam, it would seal that up. This is one of those outlets I was telling you about. See all that light that's coming through? I'll get you a shot from the other side where you'll see the spray foam on the back side of it. They miss all the time. I haven't seen one outlet yet they've got 100%. So for the ceiling or attic, they're using batt insulation, as you can see, and it's an R22. Now I thought code was like an R39 or 36. I could be wrong. They may also be coming back in after it's all done and blowing in some insulation on top of this. And that's another form of insulation you could do in the attic, and that's what I have in mind, is that fiberglass blow-in insulation. And that's okay as long as you get a good thickness and get it all the way around. Mine has a decent thickness in some areas, not so good in the others. The other thing about that stuff is it does settle after a while and you need to add more. Again, spray foam would be the way to go. So these attics here are not going to be conditioned, meaning they're not going to be insulated and sealed up. And that's why they got soffit vents all the way around, is to have fresh air come through so the hot air will go out the top. And personally, I'd pay the extra money. I don't care if it's an extra $1,000 or $2,000. For the garage, I'd have the whole thing insulated. All the walls, the ceiling, everything insulated. Because again, what if you're gonna have a shop in here? If it's not insulated, it gets hot and it gets cold in there. Yes, you can put like a mini split or a furnace or something out there, but with no insulation, it's gonna work very hard to heat and cool it. Whereas you see here, they've got this insulated because that's inside the house. This is outside, nothing. Pay the money, get it all done. Whereas in my house, it is not. And it gets very hot out there in the summer. And over the garage, no insulation. So ask for that. Now, if any of you out there have moved into a brand new built house or went through the process of building your dream home or in the process of doing it right now and would like to share your experiences with us down below in the comments, it would be greatly appreciated. I mean, we would all benefit from it. And they don't have to be just the bad ones. You can share the good ones. Those would be great also, because I'm sure some of you out there got some stories to tell. Now, we've gone over a lot of details in these 4 episodes, and if you've missed any of them or want to get caught up on them, you can click on this playlist right here and it'll take you to the videos and you can go get caught up on all these details that you've missed. And so until next time, happy DIYing.